Looks like we're going. Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. In person and online. My name is Julian Morse. I'm the MLA for Frame Lake. I'm the chair of the Standing Committee on Government Operations. This afternoon, this committee continues its review of Bill 26, an act to amend the Public Service Act. This public briefing is being live streamed on the Assembly's social media channels. As a reminder to everyone involved, particularly those who are new to presenting to committee, if they are, please direct all comments and questions through the chair. It just helps us run the meeting smoothly, and in particular helps our folks in the audio-visual booth. Please wait to be recognized and for your mics to be turned on before speaking, and the mics are automatic, just so everyone's aware. This helps keep things running smoothly. So I'm going to ask members to introduce themselves, starting with members in the room. Ms. Reid, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here today. I am the MLA for Great Slave Gate Reid.
Thank you. Mr. Jericon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Richard Jericon. I'm the MLA for Trinity-Ability. Let's see.
Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Rogers online.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Denny Rogers. I'm the MLA for Nunavut Lake.
Excellent, thank you. So this afternoon, committee is pleased to welcome Megan Wood, who is the CEO and Registrar of the College and Association of Nurses of the NWT in Nunavut. Thank you very much for joining us, Ms. Wood. I'll turn the floor over to you for opening remarks in your presentation, and then we will go to questions from MLAs once you're finished. So the floor is yours.
Okay.
It'll come on in half a second. There you go.
There we go. Thank you, and thank you for having me today and allowing CANN to speak on our perspective regarding the Act to amend the Public Service Act. As a bit of background, CANN, otherwise known as the College and Association of Nurses of the Northwest Territories and Nunavut, probably one of the longest names possible, has a very long history and was established in 1975. Initially, we served as both the regulatory body and the Association of Registered Nurses in the Northwest Territories, but over time we've expanded and we became the representation for both the NWT and Nunavut. In 2023, our mandate grew significantly to regulate not just registered nurses and nurse practitioners, but also licensed practical nurses and registered psychiatric nurses. Currently, we are a dual mandate, and that's very important for this presentation today as we have two different hats that we wear. One hat as the regulator is to protect the public, and the other as the association is to advocate for nurses. This comes with challenges. While historically it has served a purpose, given the sizes of the territory, there are potential conflicts of interest. For example, there's a conflict between the discipline and professional support or between the regulator and the advocator roles. It leads to inconsistencies in public trust and perception, and crucially, the structure restricts our ability to pursue bargaining power on behalf of nurses should we wish to do so. While CANN's regulatory role is focused on that public protection mandate, the very role limits our capacity to act effectively as an advocacy body for nurses. And that's why, as of this year, we're formally working to separate our regulatory and association functions. The goal is that in time we will establish an independent nursing association with a clear rationale that it reduces these potential conflicts of interest, and an independent association, when formed, if they choose to do so, would have a dedicated advocacy hat, and if desired, could apply for bargaining power. The distinct association would allow for clearer alignment of responsibilities and reduce overlap in our current structure. So what have you heard so far? You've heard that this bill will improve recruitment, retention, and the current state of healthcare at Stanton, that it is supported by nurses in smaller places, that they have gone to their employers, that this is an option, not a silver bullet. We agree and we support that statement, and we believe that there is evidence to back that up. Some of that evidence, to just very briefly outline that for you, is that this isn't a new concept. In fact, it's quite a long-studied issue. In 2007, a research study showed that nurse-led collective bargaining units resulted in higher wages. And while the impact on job satisfaction was quite mixed at the time, the study indicated that when focused on retention and satisfaction, The units impacted would lead to a ripple effect of improved nurse retention, recruitment, job satisfaction, and ultimately patient care. This was further supported in 2010 by a nursing labor management partnership trial that demonstrated improved outcomes for nurses by having the unions or the associations work directly with the hospital management. This approach was the best avenue for success as it reduced the burnout, allowed for more collaborative problem solving, and resulted in better patient care. However, the nurses that you've heard from so far have told us that they have tried this avenue and have not succeeded, and largely because it is not possible without employer engagement. And this continues to be studied. Even in 2023, we recently received an article from the Journal of Nursing Regulation, and it showed that nursing unions did drastically improve job satisfaction. It was found that nurse-led unions resulted in lower turnover at about 10% versus 13% for the non-union nurses. Members also reported greater advocacy and awareness of issues impacting their profession on the front line. And currently, nurses are vocalizing that the existing collective bargaining unit is not able to provide the level of advocacy that they desire. Across Canada, independent nursing associations successfully advocate for their members, strengthening broader labor movements through tailored representation. In the proposal for an act to amend the Public Service Act, it states that across Canada, independent nursing associations successfully advocate for their members while still collaborating with and strengthening broader labor movements, showing how tailored representation can enhance rather than undermine worker solidarity. That is again why we are working towards the establishment of an independent association that can have the voice necessary to advocate and bargain for nurses in the Northwest Territories. We asked nurses to tell us about their opinions through a short survey. A group of nurses came to us asking us to conduct this survey with our membership to see if their opinions went beyond their small group and instead reflected all nurses in the NWT and Nunavut. It does have limitations, absolutely. But we viewed this as a stepping stone for information gathering and an understanding of the situation as it was currently perceived. So we asked nurses directly, do you feel the current bargaining structure reflects the professional needs and responsibilities of nurses? The response was quite telling. Some of the quotes included, the existing bargaining structure partially reflects the professional needs and responsibilities of nurses, but more strongly reflects the ideology of trade unions and the protectionism of management. Nurses also highlighted that there is no regard for shift workers. We also questioned, what are the specific professional needs and responsibilities of nurses? Who and how has this been determined and articulated? The message again was clear. Many nurses reported not feeling adequately represented. And on the screen, you can see a figure of 80% for this number. Nurses stated that the existing bargaining structure partially reflects the professional needs and responsibilities of nurses, often comparing nurses to pay level 16 workers in government office settings and how they cannot be compared one-to-one. They are quite different positions. They cannot have the same needs met through the same agreements. So elsewhere, nurses are represented by nurse-specific unions. In fact, the territories, all three, remain the last jurisdictions to adopt this model. It's also been stated that nurses in the Northwest Territories have a higher wage than anywhere else in Canada. However, nurses continue to cite that they want increased compensation, improved workloads, improved housing, and other benefits that nursing unions in other jurisdictions would afford them. And on this slide, you'll note that of the questions that we asked the nurses in terms of incentives, all of the followings can be impacted by bargaining. To get a little deeper into what this means, if we look at a scenario where an Alberta nurse makes $39 per hour and moves to the NWT, the equivalent wage would need to increase by 39% to maintain the same standard of living. That is because our standard of living is reflected by our cost of living, which is 39% higher than the national average. We need to consider that the rate per hour is not actually equivalent. And so our equivalent would need to be $54.21 per hour. While the NWT wage for RNs is typically $54 an hour, pay level 16, when adjusted for the cost of living, it's actually a shortfall of 21 cents per hour when adjusted to the cost of living compared to nurses in Alberta. So what's next? Well, regardless of the outcome of this proposed bill, the establishment of a nursing association is crucial. Not just for this issue, but for many issues that nurses need to be able to advocate appropriately without this conflict of interest hanging over them. It would provide a mechanism to strengthen nurses' representation and support advocacy for profession-specific improvements. And whether or not the modernization of the Public Service Act or Bill 26 happens, the underlying issue is that many nurses report not feeling adequately represented. Moving forward, it is paramount to ensure that nurses are included, their perspectives are heard, and they have opportunities to contribute to decisions shaping the future of the profession. Providing nurses with the ability to engage in collective bargaining would create an opportunity for representation comparable to other jurisdictions with nurse-specific unions. We understand that healthcare is complex, that there is no single solution. This initiative is an option, not a silver bullet, as has been said many times before, and progress will require tailored responses to address specific needs. Thank you for your time and attention to this matter, and it was a pleasure to provide CANN's perspective on the important topic, particularly using our association hat.
Excellent. Thank you for the presentation. I'll now turn it over to committee members for questions, if there are any. I think we've got some time today, so we'll probably just do traditional 2 questions per. Does that work? Okay. Do you have questions, Ms. Reed?
Start us off if you like, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. Could you speak a little bit more to how CANN will separate itself into a regulatory body in one instance and the opportunity to collectively bargain as an association? You touched upon it briefly, but I would like to know a little bit more. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Over to you.
I guess first I would stress that the separation of these bodies does not necessarily mean that an association would want to or would include doing collective bargaining. But in terms of how we plan on doing this, we recognize that we are limited in resources in the North, and we don't want to separate our functions and have the regulator or the college remain steadfast and the only one able to operate. Our goal really is to make sure that nurses have an association and a body that can advocate for them. And so we're going to be using our fees that we collect from our registrants every year upon licensing, and we're going to move a portion of that funding to an association body so that they're able to get themselves up and running.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that. Sort of on a different note, if indeed, and I recognize this is hypothetical, and you've noted in your answer that it's hypothetical. If indeed the association is successful, this particular bill, Bill 26, does not provide an oversight mechanism in the sense that, yes, it does provide for voting, and that voting would be affirmed, or perhaps that's not the right word, by the Supreme Court of the NWT. But there is no sort of mechanism to review this theoretical body by an independent third party, such as a labor board. So I'm curious what CANN's thoughts might be on creation of this organization and sort of a within jurisprudence maybe of Canada, what that might look like comparatively to other jurisdictions who have created bodies that then bargain on behalf of their members. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Wood.
I think we would have to go and do a bit of a jurisdictional scan to effectively answer that question, because at this time I don't know what that would look like. And I don't think we would be the most appropriate party sitting here to answer that question.
Okay, thank you. I'm doing 2 questions per member. I haven't seen any raised hands online. Ms. Reed, do you have? Oh, Mr. Rogers. Okay, Mr. Rogers, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't electronically raise my hand. I had it up. Sorry about that, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and Ms. Reed touched on one of the questions I had around the labor board. But around, and I don't know, I know when you state in your presentation, you do, your mandate is dual, protect the public and advocate for nurses. as part of that advocating recruitment, we've talked a lot about recruitment, and while I see from your presentation the 39 versus 54, I mean, the 54 is theoretically then competitive if you look at our cost of living, but there's also the other factor on recruitment. I mean, there are those of us who live in the north and enjoy the lifestyle, and we do have some communities, obviously regional centers and smaller communities that are more remote, obviously, than others. And and it's not everyone's lifestyle to want to live in a community such as that. Is that part of the conversation at all around when you're looking at advocating / recruiting, or has there been any research done on that? Because I mean, I think, and then I've heard from constituents here, and I've heard from other members about incentivizing as well to recruit not only nurses but other health professionals as well, to maybe nudge them along in deciding to move to the Northwest Territories and to live that lifestyle. Is that part of the conversation around advocacy / recruiting as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wood.
It's a really great question, thank you. I think that recruitment and retention, it comes down to not just one body. I think the employer, your regulator, your advocacy or association bodies all need to be working to provide health and human resource recruitment planning. And one of the ways what the regulatory hat is through labor mobility and in reducing barriers in terms of licensing to bring people to the north. That's something that we're actively working on, and what I would argue takes up most of CANN's time. If an association was separate and they were able to focus purely on advocacy work, I think that it could be a strength and function of that organization to recruit nurses to the north. There would be more time to work on engagement with nurses, maybe providing resources through focus groups or communities of practice. These are things that employers are also doing and doing the best that they can at, but it would have a tailored group that would be more able to provide that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that comment, and I agree. I mean, we're in a competitive environment right across the country. We know ours is not the only jurisdiction that is struggling right now with healthcare professionals to have to compete with other jurisdictions. So, I think as part of that, the recruitment side of it becomes that much more important, whether we are incentivizing that financially, but in other ways as well to attract people to come to the Northwest Territories. So I certainly appreciate those comments, and that's all I have now, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Reed? No other hands up at this time.
Did you want to? No?
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the opportunity. So in your presentation, you've noted that there are good outcomes for nurses if they bargain as a professional unit, and you've also highlighted, and I'm glad that you have, is that employer engagement is necessary to get good outcomes for nurses. So again, we're speaking in hypotheticals, and I apologize because it's hard to answer in hypotheticals, but if there is a hypothetical future where you are the bargaining agent for NWT public service nurses specifically, what mechanisms do you believe will provide for better pay and non-pay benefits for nurses with this employer? So specifically, why do you believe that you will be successful with this particular employer in such a relationship? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Wood?
Again, being that it's so hypothetical, I have a hard time answering that question. I can't predict the future as much as I would like to, but I would think that in terms of mechanisms, nurses would be able to further advocate for their pay to be above the level of a 16 for a government position, and look at how they're paid in comparability to government workers in southern jurisdictions. That would be one of the first places that I think they would look. But I also think that it would allow for more precise review of the large scope of practice that all different types of nurses have. Because right now we are not just talking about registered nurses, but we're looking at scopes and duties of LPNs, RPNs that are severely underutilized in the north, and nurse practitioners. So more detailed, nuanced review of those positions would be allowed for.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Reed? No further questions? Any further questions from committee members? Okay, I do have one or two that I wanted to ask myself. The first one was just getting a bit more clarity from CANN on how they envision this going forward. So it's possible that this Bill 26 could, in theory, be approved as early as the next sitting of the Assembly, which would be in October, which would then put whoever wants to the nurses could just stick with status quo if they wanted to and just hang out there with that piece of legislation enabling something, but they do nothing with it. Another option would be potentially this kind of calving of the two organizations that you're talking about, them coming forward. How would you anticipate that working? Let's say the bill was in theory approved. Is it your feeling that CANN would step up and would be able to do so quickly and kind of come forward and say, we'll be the union representative for the nurses and put that to a vote? Or how do you see it proceeding if something came forward as soon as October?
So it's very much in the preliminary stages, the division of the mandate. CANN would not ethically or professionally ever take on the function of trying to become the union for nurses. It would not be within our mandate. It would be considered quite a conflict of interest, in my opinion, and in the board's opinion. The association, should it be successful and move forward, would take on that role. And so right now, in the process of dividing our mandate, we are looking to hire an executive director and to build a board of directors so that independent body, should they choose to, could attempt that. Now, our timeline, we are going as fast as we possibly can with this to make sure that we stand it up quickly, recognizing the needs of our registrants, but we're also trying to make sure that we do a really good job at the same time. And so we're hoping for a January 1st division of mandate, and if at that time the executive director wanted to apply for collective bargaining power, they would be able to do so.
Okay, and you may not be able to answer this question, but I suppose it's also a possibility that if this bill were to theoretically pass, a different nurses union could represent the nurses from the South. I think that happens in a number of different cases with different professions. I don't know if you can comment on that as a possibility as well, or what you envision. I guess I'm trying to get an understanding of how do you see it rolling out should this bill pass?
Should the bill pass, I'm a nurse myself. My outcome, or my hopes personally, but as well as CANN's, is that nurses, no matter how this moves forward, are able to have their needs met, have their voices heard. Because what I think we're hearing and what we're seeing in the results of our survey is that maybe we hear from a few nurses out loud, but a lot of nurses have opinions and they don't feel that they're able to share them. So I don't know how it's going to roll out. I don't think I can answer that question effectively, but no matter the mechanism, I just hope that nurses are heard.
Fair enough, thank you. I think, yeah, I don't expect that Cam would necessarily have answers to those questions, just wanted to get your opinion on the record either way. I'm going to put it back to members. Mr. Hawkins. Oh, it looks like Mr. Hawkins has a question. I'll turn it over to you. He's unmuted. I don't know what that means. He wants to speak. Mr. Hawkins, are you trying to speak? We do see that you're unmuted, but cannot hear you. You may not be trying to, but... Okay, it's unclear.
Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you now, yes.
Hello?
Hi, we can hear you.
Okay, no problem. Thank you very much. So just as an observation, our presenter may have said, or momentarily had made a comment about nurses not being heard. I assure you, not the nurses I've spoken to certainly are very articulate. Mr. Chairman, I share a position. It's not singular, but no healthcare worker behind. So I'm not opposed to the principle of what this bill is trying to do or accomplish. But that said, I've heard from a lot of healthcare workers that are still very concerned. And so I just want to make sure that it's sort of framed into the concern that I'm going to shoot at. So just to get a good sense, not a criticism, I want to stress that. I view the work done by CANN as a straw poll, as opposed to any other sort of way of looking at it. So in other words, I've accepted it in the form that it's presented, but I was curious on how they looked at the integrity of their poll system because I had spoken to someone who had insinuated they may have voted more than one time in the CAN poll. And so I'm just curious on how they managed that to avoid it, basically create some level of integrity. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Ms. Wood.
Yeah, we absolutely welcome that criticism, and I think we did acknowledge that at the beginning of the presentation, that there were limitations to this survey. And the survey wasn't intended to be a hard and fast result of our membership or our registrants. It was intended to be a stepping stone to exploring this issue further. And it was a request of the registrants that brought it to us, probably those same voices that you're hearing. And should we wish to dive into this further, or if the association, when it's established, wishes to dive into it further, then we would encourage them at that time to come up with a survey method that would allow for less bias or inaccurate results, because it is, of course, a risk.
Thank you. Mr. Hawkins, do you have a follow-up?
Thank you. Just a couple minor ones, quick ones. And I appreciate that. That's not, please don't perceive that as structural or aggressive criticism. It's just an observation. And again, I treat your check-in with the membership as a straw poll to get a sense of which way the wind's blowing, or in the sense of getting an idea of some feelings in the network of nursing. So I think it should be welcome in that vein or spirit as to what's going on. It was mentioned earlier that the roles would change with CAN, and it does make me wonder, like, does it end up creating a system if this bill was to go this direction, whereas in CAN would create a second wing, a second arm, a completely independent wing through the advocacy of the new process. In other words, would it diminish CAN as what it currently represents? And I'm curious about the structural change. It was mentioned briefly, and I'm just curious furthermore if there was a way to elaborate or how they saw the future rolling out. Thank you.
Thanks. Ms. Wood?
Great question, and definitely one that we have thought about a lot when determining if we wanted to go with this avenue of change. And we ultimately have decided to go this route because we are the last jurisdiction in Canada that does not have an independent regulator from an association. Because of the inherent conflicts of interest, having a dual mandate causes us, it creates difficulties in representing the registrants. So I certainly don't think it's going to cause us to weaken either of the organizations. Rather, it allows us to have another organization that we can partner with to really assist the profession to grow and to be appropriately represented in the Northwest Territories.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hawkins, you seem to indicate that there was another follow-up. Do you have one?
Yeah, I do. Thank you very much, and I appreciate the committee on this. Just one more, maybe one more area. So if I recall correctly, the Minister of Finance had said that this was the direction that she was proceeding in and working in a collaborative sense, would work towards a collaborative sense, working with the unions on this goal and objective. And as I understand it, I think most members, not speaking for any, of course, but I believe most members were somewhat comfortable with the minister working in collaboration with the unions to come out with a similar concept with a bit of time. The member who proposed this bill ran out ahead of this and has created a focus on this. If the bill fails, would CAN still be supportive of the Minister of Finance working through the PSAC with the unions to create a collaborative approach to a similar end, even though we don't know what that narrative may or may not look like? I mean, because obviously that conversation hasn't formally started. My understanding is it's informally been a topic of conversation. So in other words, would you folks get behind the initiative led by the Minister of Finance, who's charged with the PSA Act in collaboration with the unions, if it was done separately?
Thank you, Ms. Wood.
I think it's safe to say that CANN, as the regulatory body, is here to support nurses in whatever comes out of this discussion. And if that involves collaborating with the Minister of Finance or the union, we are here to make that possible. And so we're not committed to any one direction. We are committed to strengthening the profession.
Maybe just a quick one, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate, your role, which is, at the end of the day, what's good for nurses, right? And it's difficult to argue with that. I mean, I'm certainly supportive of what's good for the nursing profession. Mr. Chairman, the only other area I do, now this is sort of an administrative question posed to CANN, and maybe their perspective on this would be helpful. They may not say, well, it fits in our mandate, we may not be able to comment, but they may have a perspective on this. Knowing that this is a very, we'll call it strategic or a very scalpel approach to creating a new union, bargaining unit, et cetera, like a new process, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, all the components that fall out of this. They administratively, the territorial government is only, 45,000 people. And when you boil it down, I mean, we have the highest capacity of government workers, and we have in Canada, we have certainly, like the administrative burden becomes very intense. And so, like this may be a domino of other potential unions, whether it's, one more follows by this and whatnot. Do you see another approach working that it doesn't have to break out to its own standing unit to achieve similar goals? Because I believe no healthcare worker should be left behind. In other words, like a focus that supports the initiatives. But I also worry about the bottom line and the overall cost of these things that they keep creating. In other words, the continued growth of administration. When people say, well, we want to pay nurses more, but we're also dumping way more in administration and way more into other processes. And I worry about, are we putting dollars to, boots on the ground, or are we putting dollars into more legislative regulatory process? Any thoughts on that particular initiative? Because I mean, when we don't have a lot of money and it's difficult to raise money, it's, these become significant choices that we have to figure out the challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wood.
That's a really great question and a complex one to answer at that. I don't know that it would be within my mandate to answer it. I would have to take it back and discuss it further with our board and our members, but I agree with you in the sense that more administration means less boots on the ground. And ultimately, what we're looking at with health and human resource deficiencies is that we don't have enough nurses that want to work at the bedside. But there are creative ways around that, and that means having administration looking at nurses and what their scope of practice looks like in the Northwest Territories. And right now, nurses aren't being utilized to their full scope of practice. So if it meant that nurses could be lifted up to really hit their ceiling of the care that they're able to provide, I think it's worth the investment. But that would be all I could offer at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Just a micro, if I could.
Sorry, Mr. Hawkins, I've given you 4
No
at this
worries.
point. We were doing 2 each. I'm just going to turn it back to
Oh, yeah.
committee and just see
worries.
if anyone has follow-up questions. If not, I'll give you another shot. Are there further questions from committee at this time? Not seeing any hands raised, so Mr. Hawkins, I will give you another shot at a couple more questions.
No problem. Sorry, I thought I was at the end of the queue anyway, so that's why I was jumping in with the extras. I've heard that this is dividing the nursing community, and this is causing different type of ripple effects that some nurses don't feel represented properly by going this route. Can you see this causing more need for further groups to evolve if this bill was to move forward? So in other words, if this domino falls and moves forward, this will create a group of nursing and a group of nursing processes. That's the administration side, but I've also heard that there will be demands by other nursing sides and nursing support mechanisms and staffing and ancillary services, if I may. In other words, I've heard this is starting to cause a fracture. In other words, they'll get it, and then we want our own piece. What are you hearing from your perspective through CANN? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wood.
So I think that you're probably hearing about the divide between LPNs and RNs, which has been a longstanding historical issue. And part of that historical issue is that LPNs were not regulated by CANN until 2023, and so they did not have the same scope of practice, standards of practice, codes of conduct that RNs and nurse practitioners were upheld to. That has changed, but I don't know that that has changed on the front lines in terms of working with the employers, working at the bedside, and working to their scopes of practice. So that, I assume, is the divide that you're hearing about. Do I think that this could cause divide between other auxiliary health professionals? I can't say. That's not my wheelhouse. My hope would be that as LPNs and RPNs settle under CANN as an organization or eventually an association, that they will feel more as a body, as nurses collectively, rather than by their designation.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hawkins, do you have another follow-up?
No, I think that's fine. I just want to finish up by saying thank you, Ms. Wood, for your comments. I know these are challenging questions, and I appreciate the work you folks do. And I appreciate you also acknowledging that you're hearing sort of some challenges as well. But you know what? Maybe in the end, people will find a way to work together, and I hope so as well. Cheers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn it back to committee one last time for any comments or questions that they wanted to share with CANN. Just give a second for folks online if need be. I am seeing none though. So with no further questions, that will bring the briefing to a close. Ms. Wood, I'll give you the opportunity for any closing remarks or final thoughts if they've occurred to you now, if you have any.
For hearing our perspective and for supporting our ongoing efforts to strengthen the nursing community in the Northwest Territories.
Excellent, thank you. So thank you very much for appearing before committee today. On behalf of committee, we really appreciate you taking the time. This concludes the public portion of this meeting. Colleagues, I'm just going to ask that you stay as we go in camera to debrief and discuss other business. Sorry? Yeah, we can take a break. Why don't we say we'll be back at 2:40. We'll give 10 minutes. 2:20, sorry. I'm reading the analog clock wrong somehow, even though I've got one on my wrist. Yeah, 2:20, we'll come back. So thanks very much, everyone, for tuning in. And that does conclude the public portion of the briefing.